The gun was cold against my temple. Not metaphorically cold, literally cold, the way metal feels at 2 a.m. in a room that smells like cigarette smoke and desperation. The man holding it wasn't even looking at me. He was looking at my father. "Do we have a deal?" the man asked. And my father, the man who used to carry me on his shoulders, who used to call me his little star, looked away. That was my answer. Let me tell you how a 23-year-old woman ends up being sold. It starts with debt. It always starts with debt. My father owed the Mancini family $3 million. Bad investments, he said. Bad luck, he said. But I'd seen the casino receipts. I'd seen the women. My father's bad luck had a face, and it wore lipstick and designer heels. My mother had been dead for 6 years by then. Cancer took her slowly, which meant the medical bills came fast. That was the real debt, the one my father never forgave her for. So he drank, he gambled, and eventually, when the Mancinis came to collect, he offered the only thing he had left that anyone might want. Me. My name is Aria Voss, and 24 hours ago, I was a nurse. I worked double shifts at St. Benedict's. I ate vending machine sandwiches for dinner, and I sent half my paycheck every month to a private care facility in Vermont where my little brother, Luca, lived. Luca has a rare neurological condition. Without treatment, without the facility, he has maybe a year. That's the only reason I didn't fight when they put me in the car. That's the only reason I let them take me. Because my father, in his one final act of accidental decency, had made them promise. Sell me to whoever they want, but Luca's bills get paid. 3 years of coverage, guaranteed. I told myself 3 years was enough time to find a way out. I told myself a lot of things in that car. The estate appeared through the rain like something from a nightmare, or a gothic novel you'd read alone at midnight with all the lights on. Iron gates, stone walls, security cameras that track the car with the slow mechanical certainty of predators. The house behind them was enormous, beautiful in the way that dangerous things are beautiful, the way a lightning storm is beautiful, the kind of beauty that can kill you.
"Move," said the man beside me. He hadn't introduced himself. He didn't need to. I stepped out of the car into the Italian rain, wearing the same blue scrubs I'd been wearing when they grabbed me from the hospital parking lot. I had nothing. No phone, no wallet, no shoes that weren't rubber-soled clogs. I looked absolutely ridiculous. I lifted my chin anyway. The front doors opened before we reached them, which meant someone had been watching. Of course they had. Everything here, I would learn, was watched. The foyer was marble and shadow, a grand staircase. Flowers, real ones, white lilies, arranged in a vase tall enough to hide a body behind. I noticed things like that now. Exit points, hiding places, cover. Old habits. Don't think about that, I told myself sharply. Not yet. Not here. "Mr. Voss sent a nurse?" said a voice. A woman stood at the base of the staircase. Elegant. 50s. Silver hair pulled back so severely it looked like architecture. She was looking at my scrubs the way people look at something they've stepped in. "Mr. Voss sent what he had," I said pleasantly. Her eyes sharpened. She hadn't expected that.
"You'll speak when spoken to," she said. "You'll go where you're told. You won't ask questions. You won't touch anything. And you will never, ever enter the East Wing without permission." She descended the last step and stopped directly in front of me, close enough that I could smell her perfume, expensive, suffocating. "Do you understand?" "Completely," I said. Then, "Who are you?" A beat of silence. Something moved at the top of the staircase. I looked up. He was standing in the shadows at the second-floor landing, so still, so perfectly positioned in the dark that for one disoriented second I thought he was a painting, But paintings don't breathe. Paintings don't make the air in a room feel suddenly, electrically different. He was tall, dark suit, no tie, collar open at the throat, dark hair, a jaw that could cut stone, eyes, even from this distance, that were the particular shade of gray that exists between a storm starting and a storm arriving. He was looking at me, not at my scrubs, not past me, at me, the way you look at something you're trying to solve. The woman beside me had gone very, very still. "Signora Ferrante," he said quietly, "leave us." She left without a word. He came down the stairs slowly, not hurrying. People like him never hurry. The world waits for them, not the other way around. I stood my ground and watched him come, and I made myself breathe evenly, and I absolutely did not think about the folder hidden in the lining of my left clog, the one I'd spent 18 months building, the one that contained enough information to bring the entire Mancini syndicate and everyone connected to it to its knees. I was not here because my father sold me. I was here because I needed to be inside, but he could never know that. He stopped 3 feet away. I had to tilt my chin up slightly to meet his eyes. Up close he was more unsettling, not because he was threatening exactly, though he was, because he looked at me like he knew something, like the space between us was a chessboard and he'd already seen 20 moves ahead. "You're the nurse," he said. "I was," I said. "I've been recently rebranded." Something moved in his expression, not a smile, more like the idea of a smile, the ghost of one seen through glass. "Dante Mancini," he said. My stomach dropped exactly the way I'd trained it not to. Dante, not Carlo, not Marco, not one of the lieutenants I'd been prepared for. Dante Mancini, the one they called Il Lupo, the wolf, the one who'd taken over the family at 26 after his father's very convenient heart attack, the one that even Interpol spoke about in careful, measured sentences, like saying his name too loudly might summon him. He was not supposed to be here. This was not part of the plan. "Aria," I said, because I had to say something, and my voice, thank God, came out steady. "Aria Voss." "You know who you are," he said, simply, factually, and then he tilted his head just slightly. "The question is, do you know why you're here?" "My father sold me to cover a debt. I was under the impression that was fairly self-explanatory." "Your father sold you," I agreed, "but I didn't buy you for the reasons you think." The room felt smaller suddenly. "Then why?" I asked. He looked at me for a long moment, that gray, storm-waiting gaze, and something passed through his expression that I couldn't read, something that looked impossibly, almost like grief. "Because you're the only person in the world," he said quietly, "who might be able to save someone I can't afford to lose." He took me to the East Wing, the same one Signora Ferrante had specifically told me never to enter. I noticed that, filed it away. Of course, the woman meant to frighten me had told me to avoid the exact room where the real information was kept. The door at the end of the corridor had 2 armed guards outside it. They stepped aside for Dante without making eye contact. Inside was a bedroom, expensive like everything here, but with the particular clutter of actual habitation, books stacked sideways, medication bottles on the nightstand, a half-eaten meal on a tray. And in the bed, barely visible beneath the white duvet, was a boy. He looked about 17, dark hair, the same dark hair as Dante, I noticed, same jaw, still soft with youth. His breathing was shallow and labored, and there were monitor pads on his chest, connected to equipment that I recognized immediately. My hands were already moving before my brain caught up, reaching for the chart on the hook at the foot of the bed. "Don't," said one of the guards. "Let her," said Dante. I read the chart, then I read it again. "This is Matteo," Dante said behind me. "My brother. He's been like this for 11 days. What are the doctors saying? The doctors, there was something in his voice, controlled fury wrapped in ice, are saying they don't know. 3 different specialists, 2 hospitals before I brought him home. I set the chart down carefully, turned around. He needs a hospital, I said. Hospitals can be compromised. His jaw was tight. I have enemies, Miss Voss. Taking my brother to a public institution is not something I'm willing to do. Then he might die. The words fell into the room like stones. Dante Mancini looked at me, and for one split second, just one, the mask cracked, just enough. Something raw and desperate moved through those gray eyes before he locked it back down. That, he said quietly, is why you're here. I turned back to Matteo. I thought about Luca in his facility in Vermont. Luca, who had the same too pale face, the same labored way of breathing when things were bad. I thought about the folder in my shoe. I thought about 18 months of planning that had just lurched sideways off its tracks. I'll need supplies, I said finally. Proper supplies, not whatever's in that nightstand. And I'll need access to his full medical history, everything, not just what you've decided I should see. Done. And I need to know, honestly, what he was doing before this happened. Every medication, every substance, every environment. And if you lie to me or leave anything out and I miss something because of it, whatever happens is on you. Silence. You speak to me, said Dante slowly, like you're not afraid of me. I'm a nurse, I said. I've dealt with patients who threatened to hurt me for trying to save their lives. I find it clarifies priorities very quickly. He was quiet for a moment. Most people, he said, can't look me in the eye. Most people, I said, haven't had a gun to their head today. It resets the scale. This time it was a smile. Small, dangerous, but real. Get her what she needs, he said to the guards. And then to me, you'll have access to anything in this house, anything except the file room on the 3rd floor and your personal office and your phone. He stared at me. I'm guessing, I said, based on typical security architecture for a private residence with this level of protection. You're very observant, he said. His voice had changed, just slightly, careful now, in a way it hadn't been before. Occupational habit, I said, and I smiled pleasantly and turned back to Matteo. I was here, I was inside, and I had, against all probability, just become necessary. Days passed. Matteo's condition stabilized, slowly, then more quickly, as I adjusted his treatment and removed what I was fairly certain was a medication interaction that 3 specialists had somehow missed. He was young, strong. On the 4th day, he opened his eyes.
On the 5th day, he called me the pretty nurse who smells like antiseptic, and I decided he was going to be fine. But something else was happening, something I hadn't planned for. Dante kept appearing, not in an intrusive way, not in the way powerful men usually assert themselves, loudly, taking up space, reminding you who's in charge. He appeared in doorways, at the edge of rooms. I'd look up from Matteo's chart and find him there, watching. Not the guards watching a prisoner kind, something more unsettling. The kind of watching that means someone is thinking about you. He doesn't sleep, Matteo told me on day 6, when Dante had appeared in the doorway at 2 a.m. and then silently disappeared. He just moves through the house. He loves you very much, I said carefully. He'd burn the world down for me, Matteo said, completely matter of fact. He's different with you. He barely speaks to me. Exactly. Matteo looked at me with 17-year-old eyes that were far too knowing. He talks to everyone, gives orders, asks questions. He's silent with you. That means he's thinking. He paused. Dante doesn't think about people. He just categorizes them. Useful, not useful. Threat, not threat. But you've made him think. I filed that information away alongside everything else.
I should not have been touched by it. I was, a little. That was dangerous. On day 8, I found the photograph. I wasn't snooping, or rather, I was snooping, but with good cause. I needed access to the household inventory to track down a medication I'd run low on, and the housekeeper's office contained the central record system. I was in and out in under 4 minutes. But on the desk, half buried under ledgers, was a photograph. Old, printed on proper photo paper, not a phone screenshot. A man, 50s, heavyset, cold eyes, standing with his arm around a woman. The woman was young, beautiful, and she was looking at the camera with an expression I recognized from mirrors. Fear, dressed up as composure. I picked up the photograph. I turned it over. On the back, in faded ink, E+R, Palermo, 2001. My blood went cold. I knew that handwriting. I'd seen it on documents, old documents, documents in the file I'd spent 18 months building, working backwards from a single starting point, my mother's death. My mother, who had died of cancer, or so I'd always been told. My mother, who had, I'd discovered, 8 months into my investigation, once gone by a different name. A name connected to the Mancini family. A name connected to secrets buried so deep that people had died to keep them. I put the photograph back exactly where I found it. I walked back to Matteo's room with perfectly steady hands, and I sat down in the chair beside his bed, and I thought, the plan has changed. Because Dante Mancini wasn't just my target. He might be the only person who knew the truth about what happened to my mother. And that changed everything. It was Dante who found me on the roof. I'd gone up there to think, to be somewhere without cameras, though I'd discovered there were cameras up there too. I just didn't care anymore. The city spread out below in a sprawl of rain-blurred lights, and I sat on a low stone ledge and thought about everything I couldn't untangle. "You'll catch pneumonia," he said. Not a greeting, just a statement. "Occupational awareness. I'll be fine."
He came and stood beside me. Didn't sit. Men like him don't sit in uncertain places. They stand. They anchor themselves. They refuse to be casual with vulnerability. For a while, neither of us spoke. "He's going to be all right," he said finally, "about Matteo." "Yes, because of you. Because of medicine and his own stubbornness." I glanced up at him. "He's very stubborn. Family trait." A pause. "Thank you." It was said quietly, like the words cost something, like he'd practiced them, but they still didn't fit quite right in his mouth. "When did you last sleep?" I asked. He looked at me sideways. "That's not your concern." "A doctor's orders," I said. "It's absolutely my concern. It was nobody's concern that Matteo was running a medication interaction for 11 days, and look how that turned out." He was quiet for a moment. 3 days, he said finally. Dante. His name in my mouth, without the formality. He stilled slightly. I felt it. "I'm fine," he said. "You're not," I said. "Nobody's fine when someone they love is dying in front of them. That's not weakness. That's being human." Another silence. Longer. "People don't talk to me like that," he said. "People are afraid of you." "And you're not?" I looked at him, really looked, the way I looked at patients when I needed to see past what they were showing me to what was actually happening underneath, and I said, "I'm afraid of you. I'd be an idiot not to be." Something shifted in his expression. "But," I continued, "I'm more afraid of other things, which makes the fear of you manageable." "What other things?" he asked, quietly, carefully, and I almost told him. I was horrified by how close I came. "Losing someone I can't afford to lose," I said instead, which was true enough. He looked at me for a long moment,
The city lights were soft in the rain, and he was very close, and his eyes in this light were not gray, but something darker and more complicated. And I thought, this is how it happens. This is how people get destroyed, not through violence or betrayal, but through 5-second increments of almost intimacy on rainy rooftops. "Go to sleep," I said, standing up. "Doctor's orders." He almost smiled. "You're a nurse." Nurse's orders, which in this context carries the same authority. He watched me go. I didn't look back. I couldn't afford to. On day 12, my phone was returned to me. Not my original phone, a new one, with my number ported. "A gift," Signora Ferrante said, with a smile that meant anything but. I understood. They'd had 12 days to clone whatever they needed. The phone was a gift with invisible strings. I called the care facility. Luca was stable, doing well, said the nurse who answered. Yes, the account was current. Yes, the payment had processed. At least that much was real. I sat with the phone for a long time after. Then I checked the secure app that nobody in the Mancini household knew to look for because it appeared on the screen as a weather widget. There was a message from the person I trusted most in the 18 months of planning, the person who'd helped me build the file, the person who'd helped me find the connections, trace the money, map the organization, the person who was supposed to be waiting for my signal. The message said, "Package delivered. Mancini knows you're coming." I read it 3 times. My hands were very steady. I was proud of that. Then I had to tell them, "I'm sorry. They had Marco. I didn't have a choice." Marco was my contact's son, 6 years old. I closed the app. I sat in the silence of my room in the East Wing, and I thought with absolute clarity, I have been betrayed. The file is compromised, and if Dante Mancini knows I'm a plant... A knock at the door.
"Miss Voss," one of the guards. "Mr. Mancini would like to see you." I looked at the phone. I looked at the door. I stood up, smoothed my shirt, and opened it. "Of course," I said pleasantly. He was in his office, standing by the window with his back to me, which I knew by now was something he did when he was controlling himself, when the thing underneath needed managing. "Close the door," he said. I closed it. "Sit down." I sat. He turned around. He was holding a folder, a physical folder, thick with papers, and even from across the room I could see the header on the topmost page, because I had printed that page myself 14 months ago in a library in Milan. My file, my folder. He set it down on the desk between us, and he sat down, and he looked at me across it, and his expression was the most frightening thing I had ever seen, because it was completely unreadable. "Tell me," he said, very quietly, "about Project Meridian." The room was very silent. Outside, rain. Inside, the sound of everything falling apart. "I don't know what—" "Don't," he said, just that, one word, quiet as a closing door. "I've had 3 days of knowing. I've spent 3 days deciding what to do about it. I would appreciate—" and here something changed in his voice, something that sounded almost like pain. "The truth." I looked at him. I looked at the file. I thought about Luca, about my mother, about 18 months, about everything, about the photograph on the housekeeper's desk. And then I made the decision that either saved my life or ended it. "You want the truth," I said. "Yes." "Then I need something from you first." I leaned forward. "Tell me who E is in the photograph. Palermo, 2001. The woman." The silence was absolute. Something happened to his face, something I'd never seen there before. Not rage, not calculation, recognition. "How do you know about that photograph?" he said. "Because," I said, "I think she was my mother." He didn't speak for a very long time. When he did, his voice was different. All the ice was gone. What was underneath was not softer exactly, just older, more tired. "Her name was Elena," he said. "She was 23 in that photograph."
Elena Voss, I said. No. He paused. Elena Mancini. The world tilted. She was my father's sister, he said. My aunt. She disappeared in 2001. My father told us she died. We believed him for 20 years. I heard my own breathing. She didn't die, I said. No, he said. She ran because she'd found something about what my father was doing, what he'd built. She was going to go to the authorities. His jaw tightened. He found out. She ran before he could act. We never found her. She ran to a small town in Germany, I said. My voice was very quiet now. She changed her name, married a man named Voss, had a daughter. He looked at me. I told her she'd had cancer, I said. She didn't, did she? His silence was the answer. She was found, I said, not a question. In 2018? Yes. And your father? My father is dead for 4 years, he said. His voice was very controlled. I killed him. I stared at him. Not for that, he said, not specifically. But yes, he found Elena, and he had her. He stopped, started again. I didn't know until 2 years ago, when I found his private records, when I found what he'd done. His gray eyes met mine, and they were, for the first time, entirely unguarded. I've been trying to find her daughter ever since, to tell her the truth, to make it right.
The room was spinning, very slightly. Project Meridian, I said slowly. My file. You thought I was building a case against you. It occurred to me, he said carefully, that someone had spent 18 months mapping my organization in extraordinary detail. Yes. I wasn't building a case against you, I said. I was building a case against the people who covered it up, the ones your father paid, the ones who falsified the records, the police, the doctors, the officials. I swallowed. I was going to burn them. He stared at me. The file, he said, is also evidence of your organization, I said honestly. I won't lie about that. But that was... I stopped. That was the price I was willing to pay to get justice for her. The silence between us was different now. Not the silence of a captive and a captor. The silence of two people standing on either side of the same wound. I've been looking for you for 2 years, he said. I've been coming for you for 18 months, I said. The absurdity of it hit me suddenly. And then, against everything, against all reason, in what was possibly the most inappropriate moment in the history of inappropriate moments, I started to laugh. Not light laughter, not gentle laughter, the kind that comes from somewhere very deep and very overwhelmed, the kind that happens when the body doesn't know if it's supposed to cry. He stared at me. Then, slowly, impossibly, he laughed too. Just briefly, just a breath of it, but it was real, and it cracked him open a little. And I thought, there it is, the person underneath the empire, the man who hadn't slept in 3 days because his brother was dying, the man who had killed his own father, the man who had spent 2 years looking for me without knowing he was looking for me. The silence after was different again. What happens now? I asked. He looked at me for a long moment. What happens now, he said, depends entirely on what you want. I want the people who covered up my mother's death brought down, I said. I want it public, I want it permanent. I can give you that, he said. I know you can. I held his gaze. That's what my file is for. I wasn't going to the police. I was going to give it to someone who had both the means and the motive to use it properly. I just hadn't found them yet. Another silence. And you found me, he said slowly. I found you, I agreed. You got yourself sold. I facilitated a set of circumstances. You got yourself sold to the Mafia as a long-game investigative strategy. It was a very good plan, I said. He looked at me. Then, it was a terrifying plan. Yes, I agreed, it was.
Something moved between us, not romance exactly, something more complicated and more serious than that. The recognition of two people who were made from the same strange, stubborn material, who went looking for things most people were too afraid to look for. "Aria," he said. My name in his voice was different now. "Yes," I said. "You're the most dangerous person who has ever sat in that chair. I'll take that as a compliment." It was one. A pause. "Stay." The word was simple, heavy with the weight of simple words carry. "Not as a captive," he said, and it wasn't an apology. Men like him didn't apologize, not fluently, but it was something adjacent. "As a partner. Help me finish this. Use your file. I'll provide everything else." I looked at him across the desk, across the folder, across everything. I thought about my mother, 23 years old in a photograph, wearing fear like a second skin. I thought about Luca. I thought about 18 months of sleeping with one eye open and eating vending machine sandwiches and building something in secret and alone. "I have conditions," I said. "Tell me." "Luca's care, guaranteed. Not 3 years, indefinitely. Done. I keep my file, my copies, my access. Nothing gets used without my agreement. Done. And if I ever decide to leave," I held his gaze, "I leave. No guards, no consequences, no deaths." He looked at me for a long moment. "Done," he said. I nodded. Then, "One more thing." "Yes?"
"Tell me everything you know about what happened to my mother." My voice was steady. "Everything. From the beginning." He reached into his desk drawer. He pulled out a folder, older than mine, worn at the edges, clearly handled many times. He slid it across the desk. "I've been waiting," he said quietly, "for someone to give this to." I put my hand on the folder. He kept his hand on it too, for just a moment. Our fingers were almost touching. "I should warn you," he said. "What's in there changes things." "What kind of things?" Those gray eyes held mine. "The kind," he said, "that can't be unchanged." I opened the folder, and on the first page, beneath my mother's photograph, was a name I recognized. A name I'd spoken to just 3 days ago. A name that belonged to someone I'd believed, above everyone, above everything. I looked up at Dante. He was watching me. "You know," I said. "I suspected," he said. "Now I'm certain." The folder shook slightly in my hands. I made it stop. "Then we have a problem," I said. "Yes." "And we need to move tonight." "Yes," he said again. He stood up,
Buttoned his jacket, looked at me with that gray, storm-arriving gaze, and this time what was in it wasn't the look of a man assessing a captive. It was the look of a man who had found, against all probability, an equal. "Are you ready?" he asked. I set the folder down. I stood up. "I've been ready," I said, "for 18 months." He nodded once, turned toward the door, and then stopped. "Aria." "Yes?" He didn't turn around. "My mother's name," he said, "was also Alina." A beat. "I know," I said softly. He opened the door. Outside, the rain had stopped, and somewhere in this city, the person who had destroyed both our families was sleeping peacefully, unaware that the two people they'd wronged most had just gowned each other. That ends tonight. The game was never about being sold. It was about who you find on the other side of the cage, and what you're willing to burn down together. His name was Dr. Raymond Holt, my mentor, the man who had hired me at St. Benedict's 4 years ago when nobody else would, who had written my recommendation letters, who had sat with me in the hospital cafeteria the night my investigation hit a dead end and told me, gently, to let it go, who had held my hand at a grief counseling session and said, Some doors are closed for a reason, Aria. He was also, according to the documents in Dante's folder, the physician who had signed my mother's falsified death certificate, the man who had taken money from Dante's father, 200,000 euros, to bury the truth about Elena Mancini's death and make it look like cancer, the man who had been, for 20 years, a trusted member of the medical board that oversaw the very hospital where I worked, the man who had been watching me, possibly for years. I sat with that for exactly 45 seconds, then I put it away, locked it in the place where I couldn't afford to feel yet, and I turned to Dante, and I said, "What else is in there?" He looked at me carefully, the way he'd been looking at me since I opened the folder, like he was monitoring vital signs. "His entire network," he said. "Holt is not the top. He's a node, a significant one, but who's above him?" Dante was quiet for a moment. "That's what we need to find out," he said. "That's what your file and my resources, together, might actually accomplish." I nodded. "There's something else," he said. He reached into the folder and removed a single page, set it in front of me separately like it required its own space. I looked at it. It was a communication log. Dates, times, encrypted message headers. 2 parties, their identities redacted in the version I was looking at, represented only as sender A and sender B. The last message was dated 11 days ago, the day Matteo collapsed. I looked up. "Someone triggered Matteo's condition deliberately," Dante said. His voice was very quiet, the particular quiet of someone who has passed through fury and come out somewhere colder on the other side. "It wasn't a medical accident. The medication interaction that you found, someone introduced the second medication specifically to cause it. Who had access to Matteo's medication?" His jaw tightened. "A very short list. Household staff, his personal physician." A pause. "Signora Ferrante." The woman who had told me never to enter the East Wing. The woman who had looked at my scrubs like something she'd stepped in. "She works for them," I said. "She worked for my father," Dante said. "I thought her loyalty had transferred. I was wrong. Where is she now?" "Currently having a very uncomfortable conversation with 2 of my men in the basement," he said, in a tone that made the word uncomfortable sound like the world's most significant understatement. I thought about saying something about human rights. I thought about my mother. I didn't say anything. "She's already told us something useful," Dante said. "She was given instructions, not by Holt, by someone who contacted her through Holt's network, someone who knew Matteo's medical history in specific detail." He looked at me. "Someone with access to private medical records." My blood went cold. "A hospital system," I said. "Yes." "Which hospital?" He looked at me. "St. Benedict's," he said. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the chair beside Matteo's bed. He was sleeping, properly now, color returning to his face. And I turned everything over. Every interaction with Raymond Holt, every coincidence, the internship opportunity that had appeared when I just started digging, the grant that had funded my nursing certification, the gentle, persistent suggestions to drop my mother's case. He hadn't been mentoring me. He'd been managing me, keeping me close enough to monitor, far enough from the truth to be harmless. At 3 a.m., Matteo opened his eyes. "You look terrible," he said, voice still rough with sleep. "Thank you." "Has Dante slept?" "No." "Neither of you." He watched me in the dim light. "Is it bad?" I looked at this 17-year-old boy, this kid with his brother's eyes and a heart that was apparently made of something indestructible, and I thought about lying. Professionally, I was excellent at delivering difficult truths in soft packaging. "Yes," I said. "It's bad."
He nodded slowly. "But you're gonna fix it." "I'm going to try." "That's not what I said." He met my eyes. "Dante doesn't try things. He does them or he doesn't. If he's brought you in." A pause. "You're the same kind." I stared at him. "Get some sleep," he said, and closed his eyes. "You'll think better." I did not sleep. Instead, at 4 a.m., I went to Dante's office. He was there. Of course he was. Standing at the window again, one hand braced on the frame, looking at the city below. A glass of something amber on the desk. Untouched. "I need to go back to the hospital," I said. He turned. He didn't look surprised to see me.
He didn't look surprised by anything I was learning. Or rather, he was surprised by things. But he processed surprise the way he processed everything else. Quietly, internally, showing only the decision that came after. Explain, he said.
Holt has access to St. Benedict's record system, I said, but he's not the only one. If we want to trace the network above him, find whoever is directing this, we need to find the source of the leak, the person who pulled Matteo's medical records and passed them up the chain. I held his gaze. That trail exists inside that hospital server system, but I can't access it remotely. I need to be physically present in the records room. You want to walk back into a building, he said carefully, where at least one person has been monitoring you for years, potentially knowing you've been compromised. Yes. That's the fastest option, I said, and the one they won't expect. He looked at me. Holt thinks I've been sold and removed from the picture, I said. Ferrante will have reported to him. He'll think I'm contained. He won't be watching for me to walk back in. And when he sees you? I'll tell him I escaped, I said. I'll play frightened. I'll play grateful. I'm a good liar when I need to be. I know, Dante said, quietly. Not an accusation, just a fact. I held his gaze. I'm not lying to you, I said. I want to be clear about that. Everything I've told you, about my mother, about the file, about why I'm here, that's all true. He was quiet for a moment. I know that too, he said, and something in his voice made my chest do something I didn't have vocabulary for. I need a contact on the inside, I continued, someone in the building I can trust who isn't connected to Holt's network. Do you have one?
There's a records administrator, Benita Clark. She's the one who first noticed the discrepancies in my mother's file and flagged them to me 3 years ago. She didn't know what she'd found. She thought it was a billing error, but she's honest and she's careful, and she doesn't like Raymond Holt. Why not? He once told her that records management wasn't a real medical profession, I said. She's never forgiven him. The corner of his mouth moved. Wise woman. I'll go in tomorrow morning, I said. Normal hours. I'll make contact with Benita, get into the server room, pull the access logs, and be out before Holt's afternoon rounds. And if something goes wrong, then I need someone outside, I said. Someone I can signal. You'll have 4 of my men within 200 meters of that building, he said immediately. No deliberation, no hesitation. And a car ready. And, he paused, my direct line. He picked up a phone from his desk, a simple device, nothing like his normal one, and held it out to me. That number calls only one place. I looked at the phone. I took it. Our fingers touched this time, briefly. He didn't pull back immediately. Neither did I. Dante, I said. Yes. If I don't find what we need in the server room, I hesitated. There's another option, but you won't like it. He waited. Holt trusts me, I said. Or trusted me. If I play this correctly, I can get close enough to him to access his personal files, his private network, the things that aren't on the hospital system. I watched his face. But to do that, I'd need to convince him that I'm still his. The temperature in the room dropped several degrees. No, he said. It might be necessary. No. The word was flat and final, and something in it was not a business decision. Something in it was rawer than that. I looked at him. I knew in that moment that Matteo had been right. Dante Mancini was thinking about me in ways that had nothing to do with strategy. That was dangerous, for both of us. Okay, I said quietly. We tried the server room first. He exhaled, barely, almost nothing, and nodded. Get some sleep, he said. Same words as Matteo, different weight. You too, I said. I will. You won't, I said, but the intention is noted. I turned toward the door. Aria. I stopped. Be careful, he said. It was such a simple thing, 4 words. People said them all the time, reflexively, meaning nothing. But he said them like they were the most important sentence he'd ever constructed. Always, I said, and I left before the look on his face made me do something irreversible. St. Benedict's smelled the same. Antiseptic and floor cleaner and the particular quality of recycled hospital air, slightly too warm, slightly too dry. I'd spent 4 years learning to be invisible here. Head down, badge forward, purposeful walk. The universal language of I belong here and I'm going somewhere important. I walked through the main entrance at 7:52 a.m. like I hadn't been missing for almost 2 weeks. The receptionist looked up, blinked. Aria?
"Oh my God, we heard you were—" "Family emergency," I said, smiling. "Everything's fine. Is Dr. Holt in yet?" I had calculated. Asking for him immediately made me look like I had nothing to hide, like someone who'd been away and was checking in with her mentor, not like someone who'd spent the night planning his destruction. "He's in his office, I think," she said, still looking at me with big, worried eyes. "Perfect. I'll catch him later. I want to check on my patients first." And I was gone before she could ask anything else. Benita Clark was in the records room at 8:15, as she was every morning, eating a croissant and doing the crossword. She was 62, built like a small boulder, and wore reading glasses on a chain of large plastic fruit. She looked up when I came in. She looked around to make sure we were alone. She stood up, came around the desk, and hugged me so hard my spine adjusted. "Child," she said, "where have you been?" "I need your help," I said quietly, "and I need you to trust me, and I need you not to ask questions until I can explain everything."
She pulled back and looked at me with eyes that had seen 40 years of institutional secrets and filing errors and things that weren't supposed to exist in medical databases. "Does this have to do with that file you asked me about 3 years ago?" she said. "Your mother's file?" "Yes." She looked at me for a long moment. Then she reached into her desk drawer and pulled out a USB drive. "I've been building something," she said, quietly. "Every access log anomaly I could find, going back 8 years. Because after you asked me about that file," she pressed her lips together, "I went back and looked at it properly, and what I found made me very, very uncomfortable." She held out the drive. I was waiting for someone to come back and ask. I stared at her. "Benita," I said. "Don't cry," she said firmly. "We don't have time." I wasn't crying. My eyes were simply producing excess moisture. "I need the server room," I said. "I know." She put the drive in my hand. "That's the compiled external backup. But yes, go. You need the live access logs. Someone pulled a patient file approximately 12 days ago. Didn't think I'd notice." She sniffed. "I notice everything." "Who pulled it?" "That's the problem." She met my eyes. "The access came from Dr. Holt's login credentials, but Dr. Holt was in a board meeting from 8 a.m. until noon that day. I checked." "Someone used his credentials," I said. "Someone who had access to his login," she said, "which is a very short list." "How short?" "His secretary, his senior resident," a pause, "and whoever he shares his personal device with." "He's not married," I said. "No," she said, "he's not." The server room was cold and humming with the quiet industry of information. I had Benita's drive and my own secured device, and I worked quickly, pulling the access logs, cross-referencing timestamps, building the map of what had been touched and when and by whom. 14 minutes in, I found it. Not just Mateo's file. A pattern, stretching back 3 years. Regular, careful access, always within legitimate parameters, always just inside the line of plausible deniability. Patient files, transfer records, medication orders.
And every single access tied to the same ghost credential. A login that existed in the system but was attached to an employee who had left St. Benedict's in 2021. An employee who was dead, whose credentials somehow were still active, whose credentials had been used quietly, carefully, invisibly by someone who knew exactly how to stay beneath the threshold of the automated security alerts, someone with intimate knowledge of this hospital's architecture. I pulled the employee's original file, Dr. Marcus Webb, resigned 2021, deceased 2022. I stared at the file photo. The face looked back at me, and my brain made a connection, the kind that physically hurts like a bone snapping back into alignment. And I thought, I know this face. Not from St. Benedict's, from my file. From a photograph buried in the middle section, a face in the background, a man standing at the edge of a frame at what appeared to be a private function in Palermo 2001, standing 2 people away from my mother. Marcus Webb was not his real name. He was not dead. And he was, I was almost certain, the same person who was coordinating everything. Holt's handler, Ferrante's commander, the invisible center of the network that had been pulling strings for 20 years. My phone buzzed. Dante. I answered. "Get out," he said immediately. No greeting. "Right now. Leave everything and get out." "What?" "Holt is not in his office," he said. "He left the building 20 minutes ago. My men tracked him to a car that is currently—" A pause, and I could hear controlled urgency beneath the control, 3 blocks from the hospital. I was already moving. "He knows I'm here," I said. "Someone called him," Dante said. "The receptionist." "Of course. The woman with the big worried eyes. We heard you were. She reported in before I got to the elevator. I miscalculated." "Don't," he started. "I know, not now." I pushed through the server room door, into the corridor.
I have what we need. Benita has more. I need to get Benita out too. A pause. Where is she? Records room, ground floor, east corridor. My men will reach her. Go to the main stairwell, not the elevator, and come out the side entrance on Viala November. Gray car, license plate ending in 449. Do not stop. Do not talk to anyone. Dante, please, he said. That word, from him, in that voice, I'd never heard him say please before. It landed somewhere central and stayed there. Going, I said, and ran. I was halfway down the stairwell when the door above me opened. Footsteps, fast. I kept moving, not running. Running was suspicious. Running announced itself. Just walking with absolute purpose, which in a hospital was armor, the universal language of, I'm supposed to be here.
Second floor landing. The footsteps above were still coming. Don't look up. First floor. The side exit was 2 corridors away. Left, then right, then through the double doors marked staff only. I went left. A hand closed around my arm. I spun. Raymond Holt. He looked the same as always. 61, silver-templed, the particular kind of handsome that read as trustworthy in the same way that a well-maintained trap reads as a comfortable surface. He was breathing harder than usual. He'd been moving quickly. But he was smiling. "Aria," he said warmly. "Thank God, we've been so worried." I looked at his hand on my arm. "Raymond," I said, "you can let go." "Of course." He released me but stayed close, blocking, subtly, the direction I needed to go. "You look pale. Are you all right? We heard you'd been in some kind of situation. The police were asking." "I'm fine," I said. "Just a misunderstanding. I was coming to find you, actually." Something moved in his eyes. Fast, calculated. "Were you?" he said. "I need advice," I said. I made my voice small, slightly unsteady. I hated how easily it came. "About what happened. About what I found out." I looked at him with eyes that I shaped carefully into something trusting and lost. I don't know who else to trust. He looked at me. He was reading me. I knew he was reading me. He was 61 years old, and he had been doing this for decades, and he was very, very good at it.
But I had spent 18 months preparing for exactly this moment. I let him read what I wanted him to see. His hand returned to my arm, gentler now. "Of course," he said. "Come to my office. We'll talk." "Okay," I said, and I let him turn me. And I pressed the call button on Dante's phone. One press, our signal for "I'm delayed, I'm okay, wait." And I thought, I need 5 minutes in his office. 5 minutes and I can confirm who Webb is. I can get the final piece. It was a risk. It was also, mathematically, the fastest route to the truth. I let Raymond Holt guide me down the corridor, and I breathed, and I counted, and I planned. His office smelled like leather and ambition, and the particular staleness of power held too long in one place. He poured water from a carafe on his desk, automatically, reflexively, the performance of care, and set it in front of me, and sat across from me with his hands folded and his face arranged in concern. "Tell me everything," he said. I told him a story. Frightened girl, chaotic household, managed to get to a phone, escaped during a staff change. I watched him absorb it, watched him decide, is she telling the truth? He decided, yes. I knew the moment he decided. Something relaxed fractionally in his posture. "You must have been terrified," he said. "I was," I said. "Raymond," I leaned forward. "The man who bought me, Dante Mancini." I watched his face carefully, a flicker, just one, of something that wasn't surprise. He already knew the name. "Do you know who that is?" "I've heard of the family," he said carefully. "He was asking me questions," I said, "about my mother, about old files." I let my voice shake, just slightly, "about a man named Marcus Webb." And there it was, the thing beneath the face. Fear, real fear, the kind that doesn't come from a name being mentioned, but from a name being mentioned by the wrong person. He recovered in under a second, but I had seen it. "I don't know that name," he said. "I didn't think you would," I said, and I stood up. He stood up too, quickly. "Aria." "The water's lovely," I said. "Thank you." "You should stay," he said. His voice had changed, thinner now, the warmth completely stripped out of it. "You should rest. You've been through." "Raymond." I looked at him across his desk, across 4 years of careful, deliberate manipulation, across my mother's signed death certificate. "I know." Silence. "I know about Webb," I said. I know about the certificate. I know about the money. I held his gaze. And I know that you've been watching me since I started asking questions 3 years ago, which means you knew, and you let me sit in that cafeteria and grieve my mother in front of you, and you told me to let it go. The mask was completely gone now. What was underneath was cold. You're very smart, he said, and it wasn't a compliment anymore. I know, I said. And very alone, he added. Whatever you think you found, whatever you've given to whoever you've been talking to, it won't matter. The people above me. Webb, I said. A pause. You don't know what you're involved in, he said. Then educate me, I said. Tell me who he is. Tell me who's above him. Because here's the thing, Raymond. I tilted my head. Right now, you're the bottom of the chain we're pulling, which means when everything comes down, and it will come down, you're the one who gets buried under it. Unless, I let that word sit. Unless you give me something. He stared at me. A nurse, he said slowly. You're a nurse. A nurse who has spent 18 months building a case, acquired the resources of one of the most powerful criminal organizations in Europe, and just walked into your hospital wearing your enemy's phone. I paused. Would you like to revise your assessment? The door behind me opened. I spun. 2 men. Not Dante's. I knew his men's faces by now. These were strangers, large, the particular blankness of people paid not to think. I looked back at Holt. He was already reaching for his phone. 5 minutes had been optimistic. I pressed the call button twice. Come now. I don't know exactly what Dante did. I know what I saw. The 2 men at the door paused. One of them touched his earpiece, and something passed between them, and the one on the left went slightly pale. I know that Dante arrived in that hospital corridor 40 seconds later, with an expression I had never seen on any human face and hoped never to occasion personally. I know that Raymond Holt, upon seeing him, sat down without being asked. I know that nobody touched me. She comes with me, Dante said, to the room, to Holt, to the men at the door. Just those 4 words in that quiet voice, and the room reorganized itself around them like weather changing direction. He looked at me briefly, one full look, head to toe, checking, and then back to Holt. You'll be hearing from my legal team, he said to Holt, and several others. I'd suggest you don't make any phone calls in the next hour. The ones you think would help you will not. Holt said nothing. Dante put his hand on my back, light, not gripping, just present, and guided me out of the office and down the corridor, and through the side exit and into the gray car, before I had fully processed that it was over. The car moved. I exhaled. My hands were shaking, I noticed distantly. They hadn't shaken during any of it. They waited until I was safe. Bodies were strange. You were in there for 11 minutes, Dante said beside me. Very controlled, very level. The signal said 5. I found something, I said. I needed to confirm it. Did you? Yes, I looked at him. Webb is alive. Holt confirmed it without meaning to. And Dante, I paused. Webb isn't just a handler. He's the architect. He's the one who bibliophiles luck. He's the one who'd been verlanting at a curtain for 20 years. He's the one who ordered your mother's death. A silence. Not just Elena's, he said, very carefully. Not just hers, I said. He's been doing this for decades. Your father was a client, a powerful one, but Webb is the source. Dante looked straight ahead at the road. The muscle in his jaw was working. My men picked up Benita, he said finally. She's safe. Her drive is already with my analyst. Good. Holt won't run, he said. He knows what running signals. He'll sit and wait and try to reach his network and find that the lines are already cut. How? Because I cut them an hour ago when my man outside the hospital identified a secondary tail on your position. He glanced at me. You had 2 people watching before you went in. I removed them before you reached the entrance. I stared at him. You knew I'd go in anyway, I said slowly. Yes. So you managed the environment instead of arguing with me. Arguing with you, he said, appears to be approximately as useful as arguing with weather. I almost laughed. Almost. Thank you, I said, for being there. He was quiet for a moment. Where else would I be? He said, very simply. Benita's drive, combined with my server room data, combined with Dante's own years of accumulated intelligence, took his analyst 14 hours to fully process. We sat in the war room, a room I hadn't seen before, all screens and organized intensity and the particular focused silence of people doing serious work, and waited.
Matteo had been moved to a more comfortable room and declared by me, officially, to be out of medical danger. He demanded to know everything. Dante had told him a simplified version. He demanded the full version. They'd argued for a while in rapid Italian and arrived at a compromise that appeared to satisfy no one. Matteo had then looked at me across the war room table and said, "I like her. She's as stubborn as you." Dante had said nothing, which meant he agreed. At 11 p.m., the analyst, a compact, precise woman named Sophia, who communicated primarily in raised eyebrows, looked up from her screens and said, "I have him."
Marcus Webb. Not his name. His real name was Victor Sorel, Czech-born, 73 years old, former intelligence operative who had gone private in the 1990s when private was suddenly enormously more profitable. He had been building and selling information networks, not information itself, but the infrastructure for hiding it, burying it, making inconvenient truths permanently disappear for over 30 years. He had clients on 5 continents. He had people in hospitals, police departments, courts, and governmental offices across Europe. He had, in 2001, helped a man named Enrico Mancini make his sister disappear. And he had, in 2024, tried to kill a 17-year-old boy to send a message to the man who was getting too close to uncovering him. He had underestimated the man. He had catastrophically underestimated the woman. "Where is he?" Dante asked. Sophia raised an eyebrow, turned her screen. An address in Vienna, an estate, gated, with private security, that officially belonged to a cultural foundation. Dante looked at it for a very long time. Then he looked at me. "Together?" he said. It was a question, a real one. He was asking. I looked at the address on the screen. I thought about my mother, 23 and frightened and running, and the daughter she'd left behind who had spent 6 years thinking it was cancer, who had spent 18 months building an arsenal in secret, who had gotten herself sold to the mafia because sometimes the only way forward was through the thing everyone else was running from. "Together," I said. "I will not tell you everything that happened in Vienna. Some of it is not mine to tell. Some of it belongs to Dante, to his grief, to the 20 years of not knowing why his aunt had vanished and who had made it happen, and whether the version of his father he loved as a child had ever been real. Some of it was violent in ways I've made my peace with, and you'll have to make yours. What I will tell you is this: Victor Sorel was not the man I'd expected. Monsters rarely are."
He was 73 and wore a cardigan and had a cat and books arranged by color on his shelves. He was polite when we arrived, or rather when Dante arrived and I came in through the back entrance where his security team had, through a set of carefully arranged circumstances, just experienced a significant and simultaneous technical malfunction. He looked at Dante. He looked at me. He looked at the folder I was holding. His folder. His real name. His 3 decades of careful, invisible crime. All of it documented and already transmitted to 6 different journalists and 3 international legal bodies before we'd landed in Vienna. "Ah," he said. He sat down. He poured himself tea. "You're Elena's daughter," he said to me, directly, without surprise. "You have her eyes." "I know," I said. "She was formidable," he said, almost admiringly. "She found things she shouldn't have. She was going to take them public." He looked at his tea. "I always regretted that particular contract." "Do you?" I said. It wasn't a question. "Business," he said. "I genuinely regretted it was necessary." Dante had not spoken. He was standing very still in the corner of the room, and the quality of his stillness was something I'd never seen before. Not controlled, not calculating, but the absolute silence of someone who has found the center of 20 years of pain and is deciding how to inhabit the next 60 seconds. "What happens now?" Sorel asked. "Now," I said, "you're already finished. The documents went out 2 hours ago. The accounts are frozen. The network is mapped, and every node has been individually notified that they've been identified." I set the folder on the table in front of him. "You have 2 options. You cooperate fully with the investigation, testify, hand over records, confirm names, and we ensure that the prosecution knows you cooperated. Or," I let the "or" sit there. He looked at Dante. "Or," he said. "Or," Dante said, speaking for the first time since we'd entered, "you find out what I do to people who hurt my family." The silence that followed was significant.
Victor Sorel put down his tea. "I'll need my lawyer," he said. "Your lawyer," Dante said, "has been detained in Frankfurt for the last 4 hours." He tilted his head. "Try the second number in your contacts. He's more reliable." Sorel stared at him. I watched something move across the old man's face. Not fear, exactly. The particular expression of someone who has operated for decades as the most dangerous person in any room, and has just, for the first time, encountered someone more dangerous. He reached for his phone. It took 4 months. That part isn't cinematic. It's paperwork and legal proceedings, and careful building. It's Benita testifying before a medical board with her plastic fruit reading glasses and her 40 years of meticulous records, every anomaly documented, every date confirmed. It's 6 journalists publishing simultaneously across 4 countries so that no single suppression attempt could contain it.
It's Holt, arrested on a Tuesday morning, trying to look dignified in handcuffs outside St. Benedict's while his colleagues watched through the windows. It's Victor Sorel, in a courtroom in Vienna, naming names for 7 hours straight. It's Matteo, recovering completely and declaring that he wants to study medicine, a declaration Dante greeted with profound existential confusion, and then declaring that he's kidding, he wants to be an architect, which was somehow worse. And it's me, sitting in a garden in Vermont, watching Luca laugh at something his nurse said. Luca, who is stable, who is doing well, who looks at me with those eyes that are exactly our mother's eyes and says, "You look different." "Do I?" "Lighter," he says. I go back to the estate. I didn't plan to. Or rather, I planned not to, the way you plan things that you know you're going to do anyway, because the planning gives you the illusion of control over the inevitable. Dante is in the garden when I arrive, which surprises me. I had not taken him for a garden person. He is standing in front of a bed of white lilies, looking at them with an expression that is private and complicated, and that he doesn't immediately rearrange when he hears me, which means he knew I was coming. Of course he did. "How is he?" he asks, about Luca. "Good," I say. "Really good." I stop beside him. "The lilies. They were Elena's favorite," he says. "My mother planted them after she disappeared. She never stopped believing Elena was alive." A pause. "She died before she found out the truth." "I'm sorry," I say. "She would have liked you," he says. He turns to look at me. Those gray eyes, storm arriving, familiar now in a way that still does something dangerous to my chest. Obstinate women were her favorite kind. "I'm not obstinate," I say. "You got yourself sold to the mafia as an investigative strategy," he says. "I prefer creative," I say. He looks at me for a long moment. The garden is very quiet. The lilies are very white. "What do you want?" he asks. The same question he asked me months ago, across a desk with a folder between us, but different now. The words the same, the weight entirely other. I look at the lilies. I look at him. I think about everything I've spent 6 years protecting myself from, every wall I built, every exit I mapped, every relationship I kept at the careful distance of useful but not necessary. I think about the way he said, "Please." "I want to stay," I say, "if the offer still stands." "The offer," he says, "has been standing since Vienna. I have conditions. I know. I'm not going to be decorative," I say. "I would sooner ask the weather to be decorative," he says. "I need my own space, my own work. I'm going to consult on the legal case completion, and I'm going to set up a proper medical practice for Matteo's ongoing care, and I'm possibly going to write a book. Aria, about healthcare system vulnerabilities. Aria. Yes." He steps forward. Not quickly. He never does anything quickly. He's the most deliberate person I've ever met, but with absolute certainty. The way he moves through every room, like the space was already his, and he's simply reminding it. He raises one hand and tucks a strand of hair behind my ear, with a carefulness that is, from this man, more devastating than anything loud could ever be. "Stop planning," he says, very quietly. "For 30 seconds. Just stop." I stop. He looks at me. "Hi," I say, slightly stupidly. Something happens to his face, something warm and real and entirely unguarded, something I'd spent weeks watching from behind the armor of necessity and hadn't let myself name until now. "Hi," he says, and the distance between us closes. Not dramatically, not cinematically, just the way true things happen, quietly, inevitably, like something that was always going to occur, finally choosing its moment.
His forehead drops to mine. Neither of us moves for a long time. "You scared me," he says finally, against my temple. His voice is stripped of everything except the truth of it. "In that office, when you went in and I couldn't reach you." "I know," I say. "I'm sorry." "Don't be sorry," he says. Just a pause. "Tell me when you're going to do something terrifying. I would like the option of arguing with the weather in real time." I laugh, quietly, against his shoulder. "I'll try," I say. "That's not what I asked for." "It's what you're getting." A pause. "Obstinate," he says. "Creative," I say. He pulls back just far enough to look at me. And the look on his face, the look that doesn't have a category in any medical textbook, not clinical, not professional, not the expression of a man assessing a threat or an asset or a chess piece, is the most dangerous thing he's ever done to me. "Stay," he says. "Yes," I say. 6 months later, Victor Sorel is sentenced to 31 years without possibility of parole. The verdict is read in Vienna on a Thursday, in a courtroom packed with journalists and lawyers, and the particular silent weight of justice arriving late, but arriving completely. I watch from the third row. Dante is beside me. Under the table, his hand finds mine. He doesn't look at me when it happens. Neither do I. We just watch the man in the dock receive everything that's coming to him, and we hold on. For my mother, for his, for everyone the dark tried to swallow. It didn't win. We made sure of that.
1 year later. The letter arrives on a Tuesday. I almost miss it, buried in the stack of correspondence that Dante's assistant leaves on the hall table, between a legal brief and Matteo's university acceptance letter. Architecture, in the end. Dante is still processing this with the expression of a man who has survived organized crime, but may not survive an architect in the family. It's addressed to me, not Aria Voss. The name on the envelope is the name my mother used before she ran, her real name. The name that connects us, that I'd only recently begun to speak aloud, to claim as mine as well as hers. The handwriting is unfamiliar. The postmark is Palermo. I stand in the hallway for a long time, holding it. Dante appears in the doorway at the end of the hall, drawn by whatever radar has developed between us in 12 months of shared space, of learning the particular grammar of each other. The way I know he's been awake for an hour before he comes downstairs. The way he knows I'm troubled before I've arranged my face. He sees my face now. He comes. He doesn't ask what's wrong. He just stands beside me and looks at the letter and waits. Because that's what he does. He waits. He watches. He stays. Someone knew my mother's name, I say. Someone in Palermo. Victor Sorel named 47 individuals, Dante says carefully. 43 have been arrested. 4 are still unaccounted for. I look at the letter. "Open it," he says. "It might change things," I say. "Yes," he says. "It might." I open it. Inside is a single card. No signature. Just a sentence, handwritten in the same careful script as the address. She told me, if anything happened to her, to find you. She said you'd be ready. She was right. We need to meet. I read it 3 times. Then I hand it to Dante. He reads it. He looks up at me. And in his gray, storm-arriving eyes, I see exactly what I feel. It's not over. It was never over. There's one more door. His hand is already reaching for his phone. Mine is already reaching for my files. Some things don't change. We are, the two of us, still exactly who we were in that foyer. Me with my chin up and my clogs and my hidden folder. Him coming down the stairs into the dark like something inevitable. Just less alone now. Never alone again. Some secrets don't end with the verdict. Some secrets were just waiting for you to be ready to find them. And in Palermo, someone has been waiting 23 years. For you.
Please like and subscribe.